Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Just for the record, I'd like to ensure that everyone here in attendance, including the public, are made aware that our assistant clerk is taking part virtually, as both our full-time clerk and our assistant clerk are out of the country. So they are taking participate. Our assistant clerk is participating virtually, which is allowed. We've confirmed that with the Department of Environment and Local Government. So welcome, everyone. I will call this regular meeting of the Village of Fundy Albert Council for April 2nd, 2024 to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. It was circulated in advance. I would propose the addition of item 11H, which is a motion to take back a motion from the table. And item number 12, which is public comments and statements. This would make the closed session item number 13 and the adjournment item number 14. First of all, do all councillors consent to the addition of the agenda, the items to the agenda as identified? So noted that everyone consents. All being in favor, I'll accept a motion to adopt the amended agenda. So moved by Councillor Elderkin, seconded by Councillor Land. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Any conflicts of interest to declare in relation to this evening's agenda? There being none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the adoption of the minutes. And there are no minutes to approve this evening. Number 5, consent agenda. There are no consent agenda items for this evening's meeting. Number 6, public and administrative presentations. There are no 5-minute presentations, but we do have one 2-minute presentation for Mrs. Steve Chrysostome in relation to Alma Village Square Improvement Resources. So Mrs. Chrysostome, you do have 2 minutes. So you can speak from there or you can move over here if you'd like, that's fine.
Jane Chrysostome here from the Village of Alma, and on last month's agenda was discussion regarding the Village Square and Pavilion, that public square space that we have that's often visited by tourists and visitors and families that come down for the day. And I wanted to bring to council's attention the fact that there are at least 10 pieces of granite that are stepping stone width behind the village supply shed here in the village that could be, they've been there for at least 10 years, probably 15 years, that could be used to replace the deteriorating and unsafe and stepping hazard wooden steps that are currently there when those improvements are undertaken. So I just want to bring that to your attention in case those unfamiliar are now familiar.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mrs. Chrysostome. First of all, any councillors have any questions for Mrs. Chrysostome? Councillor Jonah?
Is that what the purpose was for the stones, was for the village square?
I'm not sure where they came from or why they're in excess of something. I suspect they were bought many years ago to improve the wooden curb that was formerly in front of Cleveland Place on Main Street, which never happened. They were similar wooden curb. I don't even know what to call them. They also were deteriorating. I think at one time the village was going to repair them, but they never did. And I suspect those were intended for them. But that would have been at least 15 years ago.
Thank you.
Councillor Arrow?
No, thanks, Jane. And I'll have to go look and see how many are there, but I do recall seeing them. And I also think that actually involvement with the community, once we finally sort of begin to develop a plan for exactly what's going on there, will be a good idea.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Ward Russell. Hey, Councillor Coates.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Councillor Land.
Thank you, David, for your order.
Good. Thank you very much, Mrs. Chrysostome. Thank you for your presentation. So we will now move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is reports and recommendations from committees and private meetings. There are no recommendations from committees and private meetings. Number 8, reports from administration. There's no one here representing administration today, so there are no reports from administration. Item number 9, which are bylaws. There are 2 bylaws for consideration this evening. In order to be adopted, bylaws must receive 3 readings. The 2 draft bylaws will be read once by first reading today only. Notice will be posted on the Village of Fundy Albert website twice a week for 2 weeks, giving notice of the municipality's intention to enact the bylaw. And at least 14 days will elapse between the posting of the first notice and it receiving 3rd reading. Drafts of the bylaws will be available for viewing on the Village of Fundy Albert website, and copies will be available at the municipal office for public viewing. These bylaws will then be brought back for 2nd reading by section and then 3rd reading at the May regular meeting. Prior to final adoption by council, amendments to the bylaws can be brought forward for consideration by motion by council. Item number 9A is a dangerous or unsightly premises bylaw for Fundy Albert. Prior to January 1st, 2023, the former incorporated municipalities of Alma, Hillsborough, and Riverside, Albert each had their own dangerous or unsightly premises bylaw. The Council of Fundy Albert must now enact a new bylaw to replace the previous ones and incorporate the areas of the new municipality that were previously impacted by Section 191, subsection 1 of the Local Governance Act, which meant that they weren't covered under any municipal bylaw, but rather they were the responsibility of the province, carried out through the Department of the Environment. So I will now accept a motion that first reading by title be given to bylaw 24-06, a dangerous or unsightly premises bylaw for Fundy Albert.
I move the first reading by title be given to bylaw 2024-06, a bylaw related to dangerous or unsightly premises in the Village of Fundy Albert.
So moved by Councillor Land. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Jonah. Any discussion on the motion?
The only thing I would mention is that the bylaw that is our draft bylaw that's being posted is very much built from text that is in the Local Governance Act. And in fact, the Local Governance Act makes clear that a municipality's bylaw on unsightly premises needs to follow this. So when you go in there, and it's very legal, many provisions in there, and it's almost verbatim from Part 13 of the Local Governance Act, which is addressing dangerous or unsightly premises.
Correct. Any other questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion as presented signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. I'll now accept a motion that first reading by title be given to bylaw 2022-04A, a bylaw to amend a bylaw 2022-04, a bylaw respecting the remuneration of the Council of Fundy Albert. If someone would be so pleased to read that.
Yes, so this one's, I move that first reading by title be given to bylaw number 2002-04A, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2002-4, respecting the remuneration of council for Fundy Albert.
So moved by Councillor Arrow. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Coates. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Arrow, any comments?
The one thing I would mention here is the amended, this is an amendment to an existing bylaw, and it's a very small amendment to change a single word from shall to may concerning cost of living increases.
Correct. Any other comments?
Calling it bylaw 2002, it's actually 2022. I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just
So noted. 2022-04A, which amends 2022-04. Correct. Any other comments or questions? If not, all in favor of the motion to adopt the first reading, signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. So we now move on to item number 10, and the goal will be to make sure we post those bylaws. They're already posted on the Village of Fundy Albert website for folks to review, and they will be notices will be posted in addition to that, drawing folks to attention to the website so that folks know that there's a new proposed bylaw in place, and that'll be done for the next 2 weeks, twice a week. And then the bylaws will come back for third reading by section, and then second reading by section, and then third reading by title only. And then will become a municipal bylaw. And I would like to point out, I'd like to thank Councillor Arrow, because Councillor Arrow pointed out a couple of important points for consideration for the process for this evening. So thank you very much, Councillor.
From the local government side.
Correct.
It's quite clear about what needs to be done, and we're a bit new to this game, this council.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you for that. Item number 10 is Mayor and Councillor statements and inquiries. So I'll start with Councillor Ward Russell. Any comments or statements for this evening?
Since we met just on Thursday, it is not anything said.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coates.
Oh, I have a couple of things. We have two tenders out there that I know of on the fire truck and the trail around the duck pond. They've both been closed, or what's the status on them? I had a fisherman call me and he said, "No, don't worry about it. I went to the opening and I had the best bid." Okay, thank you for telling me. What's the status? Shouldn't we know those to the public before the councillors, before the public?
What I will tell you is, as far as that particular tender is concerned, there was a tender opening the other day,
Yeah.
but there was no announcement. The tender opening, just because an individual has the lowest amount, does not necessarily guarantee that person will be awarded the contract. There is an assessment that takes place based on a number of criteria, evaluation criteria. Once that is done, and there's a process already scheduled to take place, then there will be an awarding of a tender, but not until then. So that's the answer.
Okay, what about the fire truck?
The fire truck, I believe, is with, the fire truck for the community of Riverside Albert is waiting for the audited financials, which we'll be dealing with this evening. And then once those are in place, we have to go to the municipal capital borrowing board to get permission to issue the tender. Right now, the tenders are in, but we don't act on that until we have the authority to borrow. Because if we were to authorize that without the authority, we'd be on the hook if we were denied the borrowing power. So that those take time. So,
The last thing,
Sure.
have somebody change the address of the village office on the website.
I will do that. That's an easy. I can fix that tomorrow.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coates. Councillor Land. Thank you. Councillor Arrow.
We have two things especially directed at members of the public of Alma and Ward 1 in particular. For Alma and especially, I would like to alert everyone that there is a public meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, April 10 at 7 p.m. next door in the Alma Activity Center. And the purpose of this public meeting is to address the Alma water system. And in particular, it's to provide residents with an update on the Alma Water Project, as well as planning for temporary measures for the temporary link with Fundy Park for the summer season. It's an important meeting. And I encourage all of our users, especially ratepayers, to attend. That's the first one. The next one is there's a strategic planning session for the Village of Fundy Albert, scheduled here in Alma on the 19th of April at the Alma Activity Center again. And this is at 10 a.m. So you can find more details on that on the Village of Alma website. And if you're unable to attend that meeting, there are other meetings in the community as well as an online questionnaire that can be filled in. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in the future of our community and having input in its strategic plan to review details on those things on the website. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Arrow. Councillor Elderkin.
Nope, I'd just like to agree with John that the strategic planning session on April 19th is as important as for as many people to come out as possible, and it's open to everybody. So hopefully there'll be a good attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jonah.
And just add to that, the other two get-togethers is a Riverside Albert Center at the Rec Center at 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. that day, and we also have ones at 6:30 to 8 p.m. So, yes, everybody get out from me. We want to hear your thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much. And I won't add anything to that. That was really something that I was going to mention. But what I would like to maybe inform the public is that if you don't see the members of your council at your session, that's by design. The idea is not to influence any conversation. Council will actually have its own session with the facilitators the following Saturday, and there is a virtual session. Being held with council just on the issue of local governance prior to that. So there will be. So the idea behind that is not that we don't want to support you as you attend the sessions, but rather it's not to have any influence on any discussion that takes place. So I think it's done at the request of the facilitators. So thank you very much. So that was it for, unless somebody else wants to add something. The next item is item number 11. So we're getting into notices of motion and resolutions. So item 11A, which is a motion related to the Southeast Regional Service Commission waste collection. So waste collection in the community of Hillsborough is currently managed by the Village of Fundy Albert through a contractor. Collection in the communities of Alma and Riverside Albert is currently being managed by municipal employees and our administrative employees. Collection agreements in the former local service districts are currently managed by the local service manager for those former local service districts and are due to expire in November of 2024. The Southeast Regional Service Commission is looking to manage solid waste collection regionally, beginning when the current solid waste collections agreements expire, until such time as a regional model is implemented, ideally in February of 2025 or earlier. In order to do that, it requires a resolution by council to authorize the Southeast Regional Service Commission to assume the responsibility for the collection agreements after November 2024, pending the development of a regional collection model. So for that reason, I would accept a motion to proceed with that recommendation.
Whereas the provincial solid waste collection contracts will be terminated in November of 2024, and whereas the Southeast Regional Service Commission is endeavoring to implement a regional solid waste collection program, and whereas the Village of Fundy Albert will need to find an alternate solution to solid waste collection until a regional model is implemented, be it resolved that the Council of the Village of Fundy Albert inform the Southeast Regional Service Commission of its intention to opt into a regional solid waste collection model to be managed by Eco 360 starting February 1st, 2025 or earlier. Be it further resolved that the Council of the Village of Fundy Albert approach the Southeast Regional Service Commission Eco 360 to provide assistance in contracting with the solid waste collection provider to Fundy Albert from November of 2024 until a regional solid waste collection solution is implemented.
So moved by Councillor Ward Russell. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Land. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Ward Russell, any comments? No. Councillor Land? Anyone else have any comments or questions?
I do. The obvious missing bit here, it is about money, the cost of such. So if this, I see that, you know, be it resolved that we inform the commission of our intention to opt in. Do we want to have a condition to such an opt-in? The conditional on that the cost is acceptable to us. I wouldn't want to be agreeing to a blank check here.
We can add something to that. The motion that was adopted is the same motion that's being adopted in other municipalities in the Southeast region. It's a template motion that was presented. The idea being that it's to bridge the gap from November of 2024 to January 2025. I believe, and I can't say with any degree of certainty because I can't speak on behalf of the Southeast Regional Service Commission, that they are looking to just develop a short-term contract with the solid waste providers, the collection providers, to get us to a point where we would get into 2025. Of course, the discussions getting into 2025 would be part of the budget discussions and part of that. So I really am not that well informed, Councillor, to be able to respond to your question. All I know is that this motion was supposed to be adopted, or was supposed to be presented to our council at least a month ago, and it had not been. So this is why it's being advanced today. So
What I see is that there's two be it resolved statements. The second one is this interim between November 2024 and early in 2025, and that is just to provide assistance in contracting. This one seems fine the way it's worded. The other one is be it resolved that we inform of our intention to opt in.
to a regional, it would be to the
Starting-
regional.
Yes,
collective.
starting in February 1st, 2025. Right. Which in general, or in principle, I think is a good idea, but as long as this is not construed to mean that we will sign up regardless of cost, I'm okay to support.
Right. My only response to that would be for the local or the former local service districts, we have an obligation to enter into agreements for solid waste collection. So there would be a contract developed by the Southeast Regional Service Commission for the entire region. And the idea being there are economies of scale when you create a large contract for collection. But to say that there would have to be a guarantee that it would be cheaper than what we're doing it for now, I think would be.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Councillor. I'm just saying that, you know, to have some form of a guarantee that, I mean, obviously we would have, I would like to think that we would have a say in the cost associated with those things, and we would be consulted, and it would form part of our budget discussions. And I'll use the example of the snow clearing in the community of Hillsborough as an example. It went out to tender, and there was not one tender that came in anywhere near what the tender was for 2023. In fact, it went up by 88%. And unfortunately, we have an obligation to provide, in this case, solid waste collection in all the former local service districts moving forward. In addition to that, there will be the whole issue of circular materials and us having opted into the regional process through the Service Commission. I don't know if that answers your question or not, or if it allays any of your concerns.
Well, I'm saying I am going to understand it to mean that we're informing them of our intention to opt in. However, that time will tell exactly what we do.
Right.
There's probably still time to opt out. Is there not? If the price
If-
comes in
If we're telling them to go ahead,
right, we're telling you want to participate, so then they'll go to the stage of the
Yeah.
contract. At the contract stage, it's not saying, here, we're going to sign.
if we were to say, yes, we'll participate,
Mhm.
and if we found the price to be too expensive, then the onus is on us.
Correct.
to develop individual contracts with a collection or service provider. And my guess is, and I have nothing to base this on, but you would have more economies of scale by going to one larger contract than an individual contract ourselves. I think we would be well advised to follow their lead and to be part of the full group of municipalities who are participating in the process. My guess is the answer could be, yeah, we could tell them that we're opting out, but then we'd be in a position where we would have to find a solution ourselves in very short order. I would urge against that.
I don't believe you have a choice at this point. I think you need to follow it closely. And as the months get closer to November and the tenders are sent out, and I mean, we've been treated fairly when environmental government looked after the tendering process. And we're going in as a group, not single, right? So
Correct.
like you've mentioned. So I think you just follow it very closely leading up to November. Keep an eye on.
Personally, I see this as a positive, but there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees that it would come in less than what the current collection contracts are. And if the current collection contracts were fixed, say 2 years ago, my guess is you're going to see increases in them anyway, because the cost of fuel is going up and the cost of everything is going. So
And you're looking at a 3-month window here instead of longer.
it's only to establish a bridge contract between November and January, and then they would set up a regional contract multi-year for all the municipalities where we would pay our share of the collection agreements and be able to negotiate that. And if that means looking at all of our solid waste collection, then we could ask them to incorporate that and at least get a sense of what it would cost us versus what it's costing us today. Any other comments? So on the motion as presented, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? The motion's carried. Unanimous. Thank you. Item number 11B. On March 7th, 2024, the president of the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick corresponded with the Provincial Minister of Service New Brunswick over concerns that Service New Brunswick had included an insert with residential property tax bills and had taken out a newspaper ad informing taxpayers that they should contact their local government should they have any questions about their bills. The actions by Service New Brunswick neglected to recognize the role that they play in the tax process, in the property tax process. Union Municipalities of New Brunswick is asking communities to consider sending the Minister of Service New Brunswick letters supporting their position on the topic. A draft letter has been circulated to member of councils for your consideration. A resolution would be required if one is to be sent.
Whereas the Union of Municipalities has corresponded with the Minister of Service New Brunswick over concerns relating to an insert that respect to all New Brunswick property taxpayers, informing them to contact their local government over concerns with the tax bills. And whereas the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick has expressed their disappointment with the matter, in which the British government has handled the situation, and whereas the municipality of Fundy Albert shares concerns identified by the unions and municipalities of New Brunswick, be it resolved that Council of the Village of Fundy Albert authorizes a letter to the Minister of Service New Brunswick expressing support for these concerns conveyed by the UMB.
So moved by Councillor Jonah. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Land. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Jonah, you first. Councillor Land? Anyone else?
I don't mention to the committee of the whole meeting. I find the letter a little bit finger pointing at the provincial government. I'm supportive of the UMNB, the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick, taking this issue on, and they've sent their own letter, which we've all seen, and it was a very strong letter. That was good. For the individual municipalities such as ourselves, who rely on the provincial government to be partners in many things, I just don't see this as necessarily being in our best interest. So I would vote against this.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments?
Does other
Council-
municipalities in the room wondering?
I do not know. I know that we have been asked to send a letter supporting that position from the UNNB. It was in their correspondence. It's essentially adding our voice to their concerns. So does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? No? So on the motion to authorize the sending of a letter, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Just so noted that Councillor Arrow votes nay. The motion is adopted. Thank you very much. Item number 11C, motion relating to grants and contributions. So at the March 28th Committee of the Whole meeting, Council was presented with a recommendation by the Chief Administrative Officer to approve grants totaling $32,990, which is less than the 80% of the grants that is kind of referenced in our grants and contributions program policy. The CAO is also recommending approving requests that constitute in-kind contributions by the municipality. Fundy Albert policy on the use of municipal resources for the benefit of third parties allows for the CAO to approve these with a requirement to report these to council after the fact. The CAO will be reviewing other additional information for those that may or may not be on the list of grants to be considered by council, and those would not be in today's request. A motion to approve the monetary grants is required.
Whereas the Council of the Village of Fundy Albert has a grants and contribution program policy in place, and whereas applications have been received in accordance with the policy, be it resolved that the Council of the Village of Fundy Albert approve the following monetary grant. Friends of Fundy Rising Tides Festival, $3,000. Literacy Express for the preschool program, $3,000. The Harvey Hall for building improvements, $2,490. The Alma Recreation Council for building improvements, $1,000. The Alma Collective, for the Alma Fleet Lodge activities, $4,000. Forestdale Home for an elevated garden bed, $250. The Hillsborough District Minor Hockey Association, it's the annual minor hockey grant for $8,000. The Albert County Historical Society, the traveling exhibit project for $3,000. The Albert County Exhibition sponsorship, $1,000. Shepherdie Fish and Game Association for the annual fall supper sponsorship, $250. The Fundy Blades Figure Skating Club, for the annual figure skating grant for $4,000. The NB Railway Museum for a museum grant, $3,000, for a total of $32,990. Be it further resolved that the Council of the Village of Fundy Albert authorizes the Chief Administrative Officer to approve other in-kind contribution requests.
So moved by Councillor Elderton. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Arrow. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Elderton?
Yes. Last week, I think we did have a general conversation with regards to some of the grants, and I think Canada Day was in question as to the funding. So for me personally, I'd like to see this just tabled till we find out more information about our grants and where our Canada Day funding will fall before this gets approved.
Okay. So that would require a motion to lay on the table that motion. So it would be a motion to lay on the table the motion related to grants and
I would
contributions.
like to make a motion to lay on the table the motion for the grants and contributions.
So moved by Councillor Elderton. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Ward Russell. So we have a motion to lay on the table this particular motion. That has to be addressed. If it's supported, the motion is laid on the table for consideration at a future date. So we have a motion. Any discussion on the motion to lay the motion on the table? If not,
It'll be addressed how and when? Do we
it would
know?
be brought back to council by a motion to take back from the table, similar to one we're going to be doing this evening, at a date so chosen by council.
Right, after we receive additional information from administration.
Correct.
So there's no date set for it to be brought back,
No.
correct?
But we're awaiting information from administration.
Correct. All right, so on the motion to lay the motion on the table, all in favor signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? The motion is adopted, so the motion is laid on the table. You. Next is item 11E, which would be, 11D, which would be a motion related to maritime enforcement services. So a council report form has been circulated supporting the need for bylaw enforcement in the community of Fundy Albert. A resolution of council is required as a result of the amount of the contract being more than the CAO's approval limit of $30,000.
Whereas bylaw enforcement is a municipal responsibility, and whereas Maritime Enforcement Services is a bylaw enforcement agency able to provide the full range of bylaw enforcement services in all of Fundy Albert. Be it resolved that the council of the village of Fundy Albert authorizes a contract for services with Maritime Enforcement Services for the provision of 16 hours of bylaw enforcement services per week at a cost of $53,800 per year plus HS.
So moved by Councillor Land, seconded by Councillor Jonah. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Land?
Nope, I think we need it. It's a very expensive proposition, but we have to look at some of this stuff and get things started somewhere. It's just, the prices have gone crazy in the last few years, but I think we need to push forward and do some investigations.
Thank you. Councillor Jonah, anything?
And this is very important, that it moves forward with it. Very involved.
Okay, anyone else?
I have a couple of questions and short. Well, one question is that this amount is for 16 hours of bylaw enforcement services per week.
Correct.
Do we know whether they're only ever dispatching with a minimum of 2 enforcement officers?
I do not know the answer to that question. You would have to ask administration.
Okay, so I would like the minutes to reflect that I would like to ask that question.
And I would suggest us following it up with an email to the CAO.
Okay.
Yep.
The next one is that we've had a few different discussions about bylaw enforcement. We did during some budget deliberations.
Correct?
We're doing it here. We did it at the last council meeting where we approved some of their staff to be bylaw enforcement officers.
Mhm.
And during those discussions, I think I believe we've been unanimous in our own belief as council that we wanted the focus for 2024 of these services to be on dangerous and unsightly premises.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that, in fact, that is what they're being directed to focus on. It's not a lot of bylaw enforcement activity that we're paying a lot of money for. So I think, and just even the dangerous and unsightly premises is probably going to consume this amount of effort, I think, something close to this. So I just want it to be clear that that's the direction that our administration is providing to Maritime Enforcement Services.
And that remains to be confirmed through our chief administrative officer, but I do know that that's what they have been focusing. And they have already visited different addresses.
Okay.
And are continuing to do that. Despite the fact that we don't have our dangerous or unsightly premises bylaw is not fully in effect for all of our areas, but they are looking at addresses in all of the community.
And clearly, if we had some other bylaw issue, we can redirect that we believe is more important. We can redirect this bylaw enforcement service to address enforcement in another area.
That's correct.
And it's important for the public to realize that this is not addressing animal control. That is a separate contract that we also do have with a provider.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments?
Question.
Councilor Ward Russell?
Just curious, Are they reporting to us monthly or but how often are we getting any reports or updates from them?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know they have been in contact with the chief administrative officer fairly regularly.
I would think it would be important for us to get an update, on a monthly basis of, where their 16 hours or what they've actually achieved or what they've actually done
Mhm.
for their services related to Fundy Albert. Second, I noticed in the actual bylaw, 2-1, where it relates to the offenses and the penalties, it is very strict, harsh wording. And I understand that it needs to be there because of, with regards to the Local Governments Act and what the bylaw means. But I'm just curious if that is what our definition of on-site premises is, and if that's what they're looking for, because honestly, the 4 items that they have listed would impact majority of our.
Right. So, being a former enforcement person, the enforcement of the unsightly premises bylaw reverts to the definition that's in the Local Governance Act, and it cannot be anything more than that. Otherwise, we're not standing on solid footing. And my understanding is while some things are very strictly defined, and perhaps some of the measures that they have to use are quite strict, they do use a fair amount of discretion when they're dealing with clients. And so the idea is to educate and to get to a compliance with the least amount of enforcement necessary. So that's the purpose of the goal. Their goal would be, first of all, to educate people, to say, listen, you need to clean this up. This is what is on your property that would fall within the definition. But if you're asking whether we can expand that definition,
No,
the
I'm not
answer,
asking to expand it. I'm just, what my definition on-sightly and what is written here,
would differ.
it would differ.
Right.
And I think we need ultimately, because we've been asked to submit locations or addresses, and what Councillor Land's opinion of on-site and what mine is, would be 2 different things.
Right.
So I think we need to be on the same page.
Right.
To make sure that we're getting the right information.
So the goal would be for us to identify addresses that are potential concern to us. Then they visit the address and they would say, yes, no. It would fall under that definition. That's their call. And we need to keep our involvement at arm's length to support if they decide to prosecute. Then they can't have somebody behind the scenes saying, we want you to pursue this anyway. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the only other thing is, I think it's been talked about in the past for them to come in and actually present.
That is still in the works.
So I would hope that we would see some sort of presentation.
Yep. Anyone else?
Just to add to what Councillor Ward Russell said about the reporting part, because I think the constituents are looking forward to this bylaw. So I think there's going to be a high expectation for the 16 hours.
I would tend to agree. Anyone else? The only thing I would add is that this whole thing it's not tied to policing, but it's closely linked to public safety and security. I did speak with someone, I forget who it was, that it was an RCMP member. We met with the RCMP, the CAO and I met with the RCMP a little while ago, had a conversation with them about some of our concerns vis-a-vis public safety and policing in general. And there was a mention that in some communities in the Regional Service Commission 5, which is the Kent region, that some communities are actually contracting additional services with Maritime Enforcement Services to provide patrol. And as those folks are trained in note-taking and evidence gathering, that they could be an extra set of eyes and ears where the public would be a little perhaps reluctant to getting involved. So that might be, even though the cost is high, when you look at the cost of policing, our cost of policing is over $1,060,000 a year for policing that we currently have. If we were to increase our contract, then just as based on the estimates that were provided, the estimates for 32 hours a week, I believe, was somewhere in the range of 108,000. When you look at the incremental from 55 to 108, that's not a bad price to pay to get that additional patrol and public visibility of an enforcement body. So some communities are already doing that, and something for council to consider, maybe not for this year, but something to consider moving forward if we can't, if we're not able to provide the expectation of public security for our community. Anyway, so there is a motion on the floor for to approve the motion. And what I would add to that is the cost of the $55,000, I believe $55,800, 53,800. That cost was from January until December. They only started in March, so it would not be that full amount. So, but they are actually working for the municipality right now because they are designated to do that. So I expect our costs will be slightly less than that. So on the motion to award the contract, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved unanimously. Thank you. So now we move to item 11E, which is resolutions related to committees. The Village of Fundy Albert procedural bylaw provides council the ability to appoint committees for specified purposes. Council has determined that there will be one standing committee, the Personnel Committee, as well as two specified purpose committees. These were discussed during the Committee of the Whole meeting on March 28th. One is I would require the standing committee would be the Personnel Committee, so I would need a motion to approve that committee, to appoint that committee.
Whereas the Village of Fundy Albert bylaw number 2022-03, bylaw respecting the proceedings of Fundy Albert Municipal Council and committee meetings provides for the appointment of council representatives to such committees as required by legislation, agreement, or bylaw they deem necessary. And whereas the council of the Village of Fundy Albert deems it necessary to have a personnel committee, be it resolved that the council approves the personnel committee for the 2024 calendar year. Be it further resolved that the following members of the council be appointed to the personnel committee as co-chairs as Councilor Elderkin and Councilor Russell.
So moved by Councilor Ward Russell. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councilor Jonah. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Ward Russell? No? Any others?
It's understood that the terms of reference for this committee remains unchanged from last year.
Correct. Oh,
And
on,
just to add there, even though we're co-chairs, we can still, other council members are more than welcome,
absolutely,
correct, to join in.
correct. So on the motion to appoint the committee and Councilors Ward Russell and Councilor Elderkin to the Personnel Committee, all in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, if any? The motion's adopted unanimously. The next one is item 11F. Nope, sorry, 11E2, which would be the motion related to the Chipoti Communities Revitalization Request to enact an ATV bylaw. Someone would be so kind to read that, please.
Whereas the Village of Fundy Albert bylaw number 2022-03, bylaw respecting the proceedings of Fundy Albert Municipal Council and committee meetings, provides for the appointment of council representatives to such committees as required by legislation, agreement of or bylaw deemed necessary. Whereas it is in the interest of the council of Village of Fundy Albert to create an ad hoc committee to study a request received from the committee revaluation committee for the establishment of an ATV bylaw that will permit the operation of all-terrain vehicles on municipal streets. Be it resolved that the council approves the creation of an ad hoc committee tasked with reviewing the request from the committee evaluation committee and provide recommendations to the council. Be it further resolved the following members of council be appointed to the ad hoc committee: Chair Jim Coates and Councilor Jeff Lang. I move.
So moved by Councilor Coates, seconded by Councillor Land. Any questions on the motion? Councillor Coates?
It's gonna take some time to get what they're looking for, but, we'll start on immediately and, meet with them and see what streets they need and if they've got a trail proposed, which I know they're working on.
Thank you. Councillor Land?
I agree with Councilor Coates. I think this is very important, and this can also bring a lot of revenue into our communities once we get this set up. And also, when the bylaws are in place, the people that are coming into the towns now are racing in and out. But once they have the bylaws, maybe they'll slow down because they know they're legal and it's going to be okay for them to use the streets. So, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Quickly mention altering vehicles on municipal streets. I know this is just the beginning stages to put a community together.
Right.
But I'm just curious if you were just referring to the 3 former villages, or are we looking at other areas?
I believe that's the intent. However, we would need to meet with the group that's putting the Chipotle Communities Revitalization Committee and the Albert County Trailblazers. They want to create a trail from Hillsborough to Alma and be able to come into the community of Riverside Albert and also Alma. So we would need to meet with them. They already have some what they call highway use permits with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure to operate on other roads. And what those are, and we would have no involvement with that. But if they are looking for something else, then we would have to determine that.
So is that going to be changed in this motion, or is it municipal streets? Okay, because I have seen a draft and there is other areas of interest that are not only in the 3 former villages.
Do you wish to make a change to the bylaw? If I'm,
On your opinion on that.
I would say that for the time being, that this committee could be formed, meet with the interested parties and all stakeholders, including folks who would be impacted in the former municipalities, to see what they think, the 3 municipalities, to see if there's what level of interest and or support and or opposition that might exist. And then if there are other areas of the municipality that we want to engage in, that could expand the whole idea of who needs to be involved, because we are the local government for the body, but we don't have any control over municipal highways. And we don't control, say, as an example, the Niagara Road. We don't necessarily control that. That would have to be a conversation that would have to occur between us and the provincial authorities. So I would say probably recommend just leaving it for the time being, to form the committee and then have a meeting and then come back with a recommendation to council at some point. This is not something that's going to happen in 2024. This committee needs to get to figure out what where the trail is going to go. And that's a conversation that has to occur with the Southeast Snowmobile Association, as well as the ATV Club and Chipotle Communities Revitalization. And the landowners, correct. Yep. Because any landowner agreements that currently exist with the Snowmobile Association do not automatically transfer to the ATV Club. Anything else? So if not, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any. Motion's adopted unanimously. Item number 11E3, which is a motion related to the consolidation of water and wastewater bylaws. So, Councillor, I believe Councillor Arrow.
Take a motion. Whereas the Village of Fundy Albert bylaw number 2022-03, a bylaw respecting the proceedings of Fundy Albert Municipal Council and council meetings, provides for the appointment of council representatives to such committees as required by legislation, agreement, or bylaw they deem necessary. And whereas it is in the interest of the council of the Village of Fundy Albert to create an ad hoc committee to review the water and wastewater bylaws from the former municipalities of Alma, Riverside, Albert, and Hillsborough, and to create a single bylaw for water and wastewater for Fundy Albert. Be it resolved that council approves the creation of an ad hoc committee tasked with reviewing the water and wastewater bylaws in place in the municipality and making recommendations to council that would consolidate these bylaws into a single bylaw. Be it further resolved that the following members of council be appointed to the ad hoc committee. Chair, Councillor Arrow, myself, member, Councillor Albercan from Ward 2.
So moved by Councillor Arrow. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Coates. Any discussion, Councillor Arrow?
Yeah, I'd just like to make it clear that the intention of creating a single bylaw is because that's how we work now in Fundy Albert. But there's an understanding among everyone that the three water and wastewater systems that we have in Fundy Albert are completely separate. And so if there are particular needs that one system may have versus another in terms of bylaw wording, that would be accommodated. And the same would hold true to anything related to the fee structure for the systems. The systems are separate. They all have separate fee structures right now. There's no intention that in the short term that'll change, but any refinements or improvements to the fee structures that are sorely needed in some communities at least would be addressed in this activity.
Correct. Anyone else? Comments? If not, all in favor of the motion as presented by Councillor Arrow signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? No, motion's adopted unanimously. Thank you. Item number 11F, which is a motion for a resolution to adopt the 2022 Riverside Albert audited financials. Motion is required to adopt the draft 2022 audited financial statements for the former incorporated municipality of Riverside Albert, which was presented to council through the auditing firm Ascend. If someone would be so kind to read that.
Be it resolved that the council of the village of Fundy Albert accept the 2022 audited financial statements from the former incorporated village of Riverside Albert as prepared and presented by Andrew Turnbull, CPA with Ascend LLP, chartered professional.
So moved by Councillor Elderkin. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Land. Any discussion on the motion? This is a requirement to approve the audited financials from the community of Riverside Albert for 2022. And there are a lot of things that hinge on this, including the request to borrow for the Riverside Albert fire truck. So that this is essential. Anything else?
And so it's sadly at least a year late, or at least almost a year late,
Very close.
but we're trying to do better.
Right. And we have been doing better and we'll continue that process. All right. Any other questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Motion's adopted unanimously. So item number 11G, which is a motion related to glyphosate testing. At the March 28th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting, council discussed the merits of further testing for glyphosate in the Riverside Albert water supply. If we are to proceed with that, a resolution is required to proceed.
Here resolved that the council of the village of Fundy Albert authorizes a test of the Riverside Albert community water source for the purpose of glyphosate. Such testing will be conducted at a time as determined by the chief administrative officer and the director of operations.
So moved by Councillor Jonah. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Elderkin. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Jonah?
The part of determined by chief administrative officer and director of operations, it seems that we're heading into another time of unsettled weather for the presentation we had a good time sooner than later, especially after the next rain event that's coming in the next few days. So I wouldn't want to see this put off waiting for some of the time. It's got to be going an event and then we're on our way to them. So
Right.
I would hate to see this set around.
I would tend to agree, but in the principle of noses in, fingers out, we shouldn't be, council should not be dictating when a particular series of tests will happen. So if we can encourage if there are specific concerns, address them with the chief administrative officer, and between she and the director of operations, they can make that determination. Councillor Elderkin. Anyone else? Any other comments, questions?
I'm not in favor of that. Because we're putting one community, and I know that two communities have open water systems. I would vote against it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward Russell, any comments? No? On the question, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? So noted that Councillor Coates votes nay. The motion is adopted. Thank you. Item number 11H, this is a motion to take back from the table. So at the March 5th, 2024 regular meeting, council laid a motion on the table to provide introduced a motion to provide temporary rate relief to Alma ratepayers who are not connected to the municipal water supply. A resolution is required to take that motion back from the table. So in order for it to be brought back to the table and be addressed by council, it needs a motion to take back from the table. So if someone is so willing to make that motion, Councillor Arrow.
Be it resolved that the council of the village of Fundy Albert take from the table a motion to provide rate relief to ratepayers not connected to the Alma water system that was laid on the table during the March 5th, 2024 regular meeting.
So moved by Councillor Arrow. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Coates. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? Motion's carried unanimously. So now that that matter is back before council, we need to sort out, we either vote on the motion or there's an opportunity for another motion.
Can I give some background here then?
The motion would have to be made first, then to speak on it.
Okay, I will make a motion to withdraw my original motion presented at the March 5th regular meeting on this subject.
So moved by Councillor Arrow. Is there a seconder on the motion to withdraw the original motion? Seconded by Councillor Elderkin. So now Councillor Arrow, and this needs the support of the entire council, because once it's brought back to the table, it is owned by the body. It's not owned by a particular councillor. So yes, go ahead and speak.
Right. So I originally made this motion at the last meeting, seeking agreement from council to provide rate relief. Not the rate relief that I was suggesting was just to hold at 2023 levels, not to go to zero, but at 2023 levels. Water and sewer payments for certain ratepayers that are not actually connected or using the system in Alma. And at the time I was under the belief that there probably was only two of those, maybe at most three. That motion, in the end, we tabled that, seeking additional information, basically trying to verify how big a problem this really was. Well, at the committee of the whole meeting that we recently had, administration did provide us a report, which was in a way shocking to me, that there's as many as 10 different water customers and 14 different wastewater customers that appear to not even be connected or using the system that are being billed the regular rates. So in fact, this problem is bigger than I imagined, which means that the financial deficit, if this was granted, is bigger than I had imagined and probably not sustainable for us. That is the reason why I believe now we should really withdraw the original motion. I personally am not supporting it. What I am supporting, as we just saw a few minutes ago in the council meeting, the creation of an ad hoc committee to deal with the water and wastewater bylaws, and in particular, the rate structure. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the rate structures are not the same. They need not be the same, and they will not be the same in all likelihood. And that the ALMA rate structure is the one most problematic, most in need of initial review, I believe. I think there's some agreement on that point. So we need to get to the bottom of this. It's a very important subject, and especially to ratepayers. It's money in their pocket or not in their pocket, and it's a big issue. And with the coming new water system and the type of increases we're seeing, it's even more important. So I'm recommending that we withdraw the motion now in favor of a full study.
Okay. Councillor Alderton, any
I
comments?
totally agree. I believe it was the presentation that administration provided us that kind of forced us to go towards a committee to get it resolved.
Fair enough. Anyone else have any comments? If not, on the motion to withdraw the original motion, all in favor signify by stating aye. Opposed, if any? The motion's carried unanimously. The motion is withdrawn. Thank you. So next item on the agenda is public comments and statements. So this is an opportunity for folks, if you have any public comments or statements that you'd wish to make, please stand up and feel free to make your comments. Yes, Mr. Warnock.
Gordon Newland of Maritime Enforcement was hired at Alma a couple years ago. Came and made a presentation to council. I was given a request based upon certain inquiries that I made, an individual in council, to ask certain questions of Mr. Newland. Of course, he promised. He said he was going to deliver this, that, and the other thing. Part of the frustration with maritime enforcement was none of that was delivered. Part of the failure was that none of that, which was promised as an expectation, was put into his contract. You cannot ask somebody to deliver something that's not contracted, unless you want to pay something more. That's called an extra work order. I would advise this body to take a very hard look at what you are asking maritime enforcement to do and be very specific. Inasmuch as you're paying him almost $90 a man for the remainder of the year. Seems to me the least they can do is start filing reports on a daily basis and upload them to you by the end of the week. That was not done. You had no idea what was going on in a timely manner in a contemporaneous setting. You've always lived in your communities, and you know contemporaneously what's going on. And if something bothering you or bothering one of your constituents, having a report from Maritime could help answer that for you and take some of the pressure off. Waiting for a month, maybe there's going to be gaps. I would urge you to make it a condition precedent for payment. When you get those reports, they be detailed where he doesn't get paid. That's what is meant by a condition precedent. No report, no pay. If the reports are apparently incomplete or confusing, have somebody look at it and make certain that you're getting what you expect. And then make that expectation as part of his scope of work and his deliverables. I've got more to say. Somebody else here might have a comment that they a question. So I yield the floor.
Okay, Thank you, Mr. Warnock. Anyone else?
Casual observer and resident of the patrol when this firm was hired previously for the village of Alma, not for the entire municipality, for the village of Alma. We observed them walking the streets, walking past parking violations with no ticket or information or seeking out the offender. And we often requested at our village council meetings, or what are they actually doing? And I don't ever recall hearing from any reports of their successes or actions. So I think that's pretty nice.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
That's the question.
Sure.
Have we paid?
I'm not sure. I don't deal with the payments. I do know that they started, I believe, at the beginning of March. And so.
I think we should take their advice and we need to look into this. I mean, it was part of my questions, but again, this just kind of puts more emphasis on the importance of receiving that information.
We'll make sure to make the request for information from the CAO.
I think it's noted before, the residents are, they're waiting for this bylaw, their enforcements, and I think there's going to be an expectation that.
I, for one, am someone who likes to manage expectations, because if you think that we'll solve or if the public feel that we're going to solve the problem with dangerous and unsightly premises by injecting $55,000, we're kidding ourselves. Because to enforce, there's a number of aspects of enforcement. One is education. One is trying to work with people to get them to comply. But where there is non-compliance, then it becomes a significant cost. And I often cite, because I'm quite familiar with the process, I often, and we, as the former village of Hillsborough, had maritime enforcement come in and explain to us what the process was. And they were in and they explained that because the process is, once you get to a certain point, and we'll invite them to do a presentation. Maybe we'll videotape their presentation and put it on our website for everyone to see. But once you get to a certain point where someone says, no way, you either back off or you take it to the next step. And if you take it to the next step, that could mean the municipality obligated to clean the property up themselves. There's a process to recoup those expenses, but there is a process to follow. You have to cross every T and dot every I in the process. If you are successful, you can make a request. You send the person the bill to clean the property up. And each one of these properties could cost, and there was an estimate at the time, $30,000 to $40,000 per property to clean up a property that's been deemed dangerous and unsightly and non-compliant. So once that process starts, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing their description, once that process starts, once you submit the invoice to the individual, they have you have to send them 2 invoices. If they refuse to pay, then you can apply to the province for them to reimburse the municipality. The province will then look at our process to make sure that we crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and then they would issue us a reimbursement of that full amount the year following the year in which we applied for the reimbursement. Then it's up to the province to go after the individual by applying a lien and putting that additional burden on their tax bill. And eventually, if they don't pay their tax bill, it can go up for tax sale. But that's my understanding of the process. So the reason I bring that up is we need to be careful to manage expectations and think that we're going to solve this thing with an injection of $55,000. My hope is that, or 58 or 53,000. So my hope is that their goal is going to be to try to work with people to clean their properties up. That is my sincere hope. But I do know that they have already encountered at least one individual who has said, get off my property. And their property falls under the definition. So once you get to that point, there is an enforcement mechanism where the person can be charged in court criminally and have a fine paid. Then we're responsible to pay for the lawyer to go through that process to enforce the bylaw. And then if the judge imposes a fine, then that fine, and I don't know if that fine can come back to the municipality or not, but that's the process. Ideally, it's a compliance issue. You educate them, get them to comply voluntarily. That's the whole purpose of their approach. But I'm really wanting to manage expectations that we're going to solve this thing with 16 hours of patrol services. That's all I want to say. Yes, Mr. Warner.
New subject,
Sure.
Main Street cross drain as part of Department.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's a hazard sidewalk. What's being done about this?
Our CAO is working with our engineering firm and the contractor.
Contractor been fully paid.
I don't know.
What is the engineer saying to the municipality about the installation of the drain and the sidewalk?
I do not know, sir.
Pay the contractor for that fixed. I know that's hard, but as a recovering contractor, basically
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't pay the engineer for any additional work until it's fixed.
Mm-hmm.
It's on his nickel for his, he getting his errors and emissions insurance for allowing that to take place. I know that's harsh, but I've been there with that too. I would point out to the council that you've got about 60 days till the long weekend. You're going to be invaded by tourists, you don't want to have that traffic delay there. And you're going to be invaded the following weekend by Americans, because that's their long weekend. I recommend that it all be done before.
Okay. Thank you. Any others? Any other questions or comments? So thank you very much. We have no closed session matters for council's consideration this evening, so I'll accept a motion to adjourn for the evening. So moved by Councilor Land. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. The meeting is adjourned.